I'm going to explain exclusion in marriage by sharing my experiences on how I was excluded while married. There were two ways that were common forms of exclusion while married. One was verbally being denied contributing what I think about this, and two, mentally being excluded from what I think about this. Um, in a marriage, two people, or at least one of the members of the couple, should share with the other member um, a topic of discussion and bring it to the awareness of the other spouse so that the spouse can verbally contribute. That's what I'm going to talk about first. So, one of the ways I was verbally excluded was when I moved in with my husband. And one of the first months that I received the bill for the cable, I realized that it was not only in my name, but when I called to ask for information about the channel options that we had, I had to go through him to get the password. So not only was I not there in the execution of establishing the cable in my name, I had to find out that there was a password when I called up the cable company. So, um, you should be informed of the cable bill and other things in the beginning before it is executed. But for a lot of times, um, I would be able to come in, I would be invited on the back end, or I would find out, such as in the instance of the cable, that the choices of the cable, the options were all catered to his preferences. And I was let known later on after I inquired, after it had already transpired. So that's not being included um, verbally. Not I was not even included on how to whether or not we're going to have cable, and if we are, what channels would I like to have um, in this package. The second one is being denied the mental um, opportunity to process things before decisions were made. So I wrote it down here. In marriage or any relationship, both parties should provide the necessary and proper amount of time for the other person to hear and process the topics or plans moving forward that pertain to the couple, directly or indirectly. But I remember, and this is my personal experience, I remember being at home enjoying my Saturday, thinking that my husband was around doing the same thing. He asked that I get our 4-month-old baby ready. Then we drove to a dealership that was quite a ways away. When we got there, I was asked to, but before we even got there, I was asked to drive in my own car because he was letting me know that he was going to have to leave later on. So we drove to the dealership, and my husband requested a specific truck. The salesman showed us two different trucks before we got to the one that my husband was asking for. I remember even looking inside the trucks and saying, "Ooh, this is nice. This is new." So the standard in which I was um, uh, admiring everything was very basically low. So I wasn't even aware like what it is exactly that he was looking for in a truck, why we were in there. And so that's when the salesman actually took us to the trucks specified by my husband. When we picked out the truck, we then went in to go fill out paperwork, and finally we were sitting down, and I remember my husband letting me know that this was the time that he should head back to work, and that I should just fill out the paperwork and he'll catch up with me later. I said okay. So he before he left, I remember the salesman asking, "Hey, it's going to be $800 a month to have this truck." My husband took me outside of the dealership and said, "What do you think about paying that much?" I was like, "Why are we even talking, having this discussion?" I knew how much money I made. I was even thinking maybe we should ask if they have a bike, or maybe some roller skates with a raincoat, because I knew that that was what I could afford. And so I wasn't even aware that he had the capability financially to make such to keep going, like to keep going in this process to getting this truck. So you can do $800. To me, that was just a lot at that time. And so that was number one. So it was hard for me to even contribute to this conversation. But but once he said that he could, and he answered himself, then he moved forward, and we went back into the dealership. But his original question was, "Do you think I should proceed?" And once he answered that he could financially do it, that was enough for him. We went back inside, and we were to start paperwork, but he had to go, which he had already stated earlier before we even left. Before we even left, so the house. So I started filling out paperwork, and then like hours was passing by. I was able to breastfeed my 4-month-old son at the time. So because of that, I wasn't getting too anxious, but I really didn't like being in that situation. I didn't know and I didn't know that getting a car takes such a long time. It was an all day event. I don't know how it goes down, but the salesman ended up having to call my father so that he could sign. And so I signed a place, and my dad signed a place, and then he left. After all the signing was done, and after like maybe 10 calls to my husband, and then like 20 text messages to my husband, he was like, "Are y'all done? Are y'all good?" or whatever. And we finally finished the paperwork. My husband finished work and actually met us back at the dealership. I remember there were only 10 miles on this truck. So we drove home. And as soon as we got home, before I even put down my baby, my husband was like, "Why did you sign in this spot?" And I was like, "Well, they put an X, so I signed where they told me to sign." He was just like, "But we're trying to work on your credit." I said, oh, yeah, I remember you mentioning that. I did remember him mentioning in just days, sometime in the past, but I didn't know that this particular act of you purchasing this truck was geared toward the goal that he obviously valued way more than I did. So even though he had brought to my attention that he wanted to work on my credit, then he was valuing it more than me. Bring it not only to my knowledge, but if there's any way that I'm displaying that I'm not comprehending the severity and valuing what it is that you're trying to bring to the table, you may just be going and I'm following. Otherwise, there's movements that I'm making that are against what you're trying to do. So we argued for maybe hours after that, because I know we left the dealership after 8 p.m. and we argued up until maybe the next day. So maybe about midnight, after midnight. And I was literally trying to defend myself. He got verbally and just was using terms and trying to use every knowledge of any mistake that I have ever confided in him to bring it up at that time, and was trying to get me to see why those things in my past had happened based off of what I did at the dealership, which was to sign in the wrong place. And the wrong place, according to him, was as far as like who was the co-signer. It seemed like my dad was, and I said, well, the car dealership stated that I wouldn't have been able to drive out the lot if my dad had not signed it. But my husband did not want me to just reach for my phone and call my dad and help just to understand why he signed. But I mean, my dad should have been yelled at too, right? It was an expression of him thinking that I knew more, and that I knew more than that I let on, and his fury for all those hours that we argued was an indication that how he felt out that my signing in that spot was intentional. And what I know now is that all that was a reflection of not just his ignorance, but his of deflection. In psychology, it's called deflection. How you want to put the responsibility on someone else. I'm learning so much now, but even in all that, I still am responsible for um, the forgiveness moving forward, the forgiveness of him, and the forgiveness not for myself. I can't give myself forgiveness because it just otherwise I wouldn't have needed Jesus to die. But I can forgive him. I can have unforgiveness. I can have unforgiveness, and then I can just choose forgiveness. So that's how you can have exclusion in marriage, and whether it's intentional or unintentional. I also have to be aware of the biblical boundaries that are afforded to me and use that and stop. And some people like that may not like it when you physically pause and ask them to give you more information before you move forward. They may not like it. They just want you to come along for the ride. But when it gets to that, you've already gone too far. You've already gone too far in relating with them. So, um, moving forward, I heal through my empowerment, and I am empowered through knowledge. And the knowledge I have of what I've experienced in the past and how to forgive immediately um, really helps me in the now, not keeping bitterness and unforgiveness to dwell within me, but to be aware of how some people act and behave and how they want you to continue to contribute to their livelihood at your expense.